Consider a person standing before their front door, car keys already gripped in their hand, yet they do not turn the handle to leave. They stare at the wood grain of the door. They think about the hallway outside. Then, they slowly place the keys back on the table. This is not a choice made from physical exhaustion. It is not about being tired. It is a specific, quiet movement of the internal mind. The person feels a sudden wave of relief as they step back toward the couch. The outside world begins to feel very far away. We often call this being a homebody. We think it is just a personality trait or a simple, harmless preference for quiet, indoor spaces. However, a deeper mechanism is actually functioning here. It is a process that creates a psychological gap between the self and all others. This gap acts like an invisible barrier. It allows the individual to observe life from a distance without having to actually participate in it. By staying inside, the brain creates a controlled environment. It eliminates the unpredictable variables that exist beyond the safety of the front door. This internal system is known as psychological distancing. It is a way the mind protects its current state from any external, chaotic influence. When you stay home, you aren't just resting your body. You are actively maintaining a boundary that keeps the world at a safe distance. The relief you feel is the brain rewarding you for avoiding friction. It is the sound of a system successfully closing itself off today. But how does this process start? To understand the distance, we must look at how the mind first learns to retreat from the world. Imagine a child sitting in a loud, crowded classroom. Other children are shouting, running, and bumping into one another in a chaotic, noisy blur. The child feels a strange buzzing in their head. The environment feels sharp, unpredictable, and much too bright for their own internal, quiet comfort. They find a small, dark corner behind a wooden bookshelf. In that tiny space, the noise fades. The world becomes small, quiet, and still. In that corner, the child feels a sudden sense of safety. Their heart rate slows down. The overwhelming world is now very far away. The brain records this specific sequence. It notices that physical withdrawal leads immediately to an internal sense of emotional calm and deep, soothing relief. This is the birth of a conditioning loop. The mind learns that away equals safe and outside equals threat or too much effort. As the child grows, this pattern repeats. When social situations become complex or tiring, the mind suggests the familiar relief of the quiet corner. The brain is an efficiency machine. It prefers paths that offer the fastest transition from high-tension to low-tension environments and familiar spaces. Staying home becomes the adult version of that bookshelf corner. It is a learned response to the friction of being perceived by other people. Every time the person chooses the living room over the party, the neural pathway for withdrawal becomes thicker and much more stable over time. The mind begins to predict the stress of going out before it even happens. It creates a simulation of discomfort to justify staying home. Eventually, the choice happens before the person is even aware of it. The mechanism starts to run entirely on its own, without any thought. The walls of the home stop being wood and plaster. They become a physical extension of a mind that has learned to fear the outside. This is not about being antisocial. It is about a brain that discovered a shortcut to peace and decided to never stop taking it. By the time we are adults, the bookshelf corner is 1,000 square feet. We call it home, but the mechanism calls it a shield. How does this learned shield operate when the world calls out to us? We must look at the automation that happens behind our eyes. If this is already making sense to you, it means you're starting to notice patterns most people never see. Subscribe, and let's keep exploring how the mind really works. Now, this is where things start to get uncomfortable. A phone vibrates on a glass desk. The screen shows a name, a time, and a specific place to meet for a group dinner. The person sees the notification. Instantly, their stomach tightens. Their brain begins to calculate the massive energy cost of being seen by other people. They imagine the traffic, the loud music, and the social expectations. Before they even think, their thumb is hovering over the quick decline button. The decision is made in milliseconds. It happens long before the person consciously weighs the pros or cons of the evening's planned social event. This is the predictive brain at work. It uses past experiences of relief to skip the thinking process and move straight to the withdrawal. The person tells themselves they are just too tired. They find a logical, adult reason to justify the feeling that has already fully arrived. In reality, the mechanism has already fired. It has bypassed the higher mind to ensure the body stays within its controlled, quiet, indoor environment. Awareness lags behind this execution. We think we are making a choice, but we are actually watching a pre-programmed script play out in real time. The brain has become a master of avoidance. It creates a simulation of social friction that feels far more intense than any physical reality. By staying home, the person maintains a state of psychological stasis. The outside world is treated as a series of unnecessary, loud disturbances. The distance between the self and the world grows. The person becomes an observer of life through a screen rather than a living participant. Every canceled plan is a victory for the system. Each time, the brain becomes more convinced that the outside is a place of suffering. The person looks at their phone and feels a strange, hollow peace. The world has been successfully silenced for another night in the dark. This automatic loop provides a very specific kind of internal reward. We must look at why the brain fights so hard to keep it. The person sits on their sofa, wrapped in a heavy blanket. They watch a video of people traveling through a busy, crowded city street. They feel a sense of superiority and safety. They are watching the chaos without having to feel the wind or the noise for themselves. The brain releases a small hit of dopamine. This is the relief reward. It confirms that staying home was the correct survival move today. By being physically distant, the person feels emotionally protected. There is no risk of being judged, misunderstood, or rejected by anyone at all. The home becomes a laboratory where everything is known. The lighting, the temperature, and the sounds are all under the person's total, perfect control. The brain maintains this pattern because it hates uncertainty. The world is full of variables, but the living room is a constant, predictable reality. If you've noticed this pattern in your own life, describe the moment it became clear. Someone reading may recognize themselves in your words. The payoff is the absence of friction. The mind prefers the vacuum of the home over the messy, unpredictable nature of real human connection. However, this constant safety comes at a high cost. The mechanism starts to change how the person views their own place in the world. As the brain continues to reward withdrawal, the behavior starts to merge with the person's sense of who they actually are as individuals. The habit of staying in stops being something they do. It starts to become the very core of their personal, long-term identity settings. The mind begins to fear the loss of this comfort more than it fears the loss of the world. The wall is now the self. By choosing the couch, the brain avoids the sting of reality. It trades the richness of life for the safety of a silent, empty room. The person feels safe, but they also feel a growing sense of disconnection. They are a king of a kingdom that contains only them. As the mechanism solidifies, the person no longer feels they are hiding. They feel they are finally being true to their own quiet nature. A friend calls. They are standing outside a new restaurant, excited to share a meal and catch up on the past few months. The person at home looks at the phone. They do not feel a spike of anxiety. Instead, they feel a flat, calm certainty. I am just not the type of person who goes out anymore, they say to the room. They don't even try to find excuses. The behavior has moved from a reaction to a definition. The mind has built a sturdy wall around the concept of the self. Role solidification occurs when the brain stops questioning the withdrawal. It accepts staying in as a core setting of the person's very existence. Social reinforcement happens even in absence. Friends stop calling, family stops inviting, and the person feels a strange, cold sense of deep relief. The world agrees with the person's new identity. By not being present, they become the one who stays home in every social circle. This feedback loop locks the mechanism into place. The person no longer feels they are missing out. They feel they are being themselves. Identity mechanics are powerful because they remove the need for decision-making. The person simply acts according to the label they have accepted. The distance is now a part of their skin. They are no longer a person who is staying home. They are a homebody. This internal shift changes how they process everything. The world is no longer a place to visit, but a movie they are watching. They are no longer fighting the world. They have simply removed themselves from the game, believing the absence of play is their true nature. The mind loves this clarity. It no longer has to negotiate with the outside because the outside is no longer part of the identity. This person now views their isolation as a virtue of character. They are introverted, private, or selective, rather than simply a person who is afraid. The mechanism is now invisible because it has become the I who speaks. The cage is now the person's favorite shape. The person scrolls through a social media feed. They see photos of a beach, a concert, and a crowded birthday dinner at a restaurant. To a participant, these images look like fun. To the distanced mind, they look like a source of exhaustion, noise, and unnecessary effort. The brain filters reality through the lens of the barrier. It highlights the negatives of the outside world to justify staying exactly here. A rainy day is no longer an inconvenience. It is a valid reason to remain exactly where they are, safe from the damp streets. If you've noticed this pattern in your own life, describe the moment it became clear. Someone reading may recognize themselves. The mind begins to view out there as a place of performance. It sees social interaction as a script that is too difficult. Perception is now warped by the need for distance. The person sees a crowd and feels a phantom tightness in their chest before arriving. This filtering process is entirely internal. The world has not actually changed, but the person's map of the world has become very small. The psychological distance creates a feeling of being a ghost. They are watching a life they used to lead, but through thick glass. Even when they do occasionally step outside, they are not truly there. Their mind is already calculating the shortest path back to home. Awareness of this filter is the first step in seeing the machine. It reveals that the walls are made of thought, not brick. The brain stops looking for opportunities and starts looking for exits. Every person they meet is viewed as a potential drain on their energy. The beauty of the world is replaced by the logistics of returning to the couch. The sunset is ignored for the front door. By shaping perception this way, the mechanism ensures the person never feels the desire to leave. The world outside simply looks increasingly unappealing. The distance is now complete. The mind has convinced itself that there is nothing out there worth the friction of moving toward it. The person stands by the window, watching a neighbor struggle with groceries while a car horn honks in the street below. Previously, this scene would trigger an immediate internal recoil. The mind would automatically say, "I am so glad I am not there." Now, with awareness, the recoil still happens, but it is observed. The person sees the mechanism of avoidance as it fires inside. The feeling of relief is no longer a simple truth. It is revealed as a programmed response to the friction of the world. Nothing has physically changed in the room. The chair is the same, the walls are the same, and the door remains firmly shut. However, the reason for staying home begins to dissolve. The person realizes they are not tired. They are simply maintaining a distance. This shift in perspective does not provide a solution. It does not make the person suddenly want to run outside into the noise. Instead, it creates a strange, quiet tension. The comfort of the couch feels slightly less solid than it did an hour ago. The mind is now watching itself watch the world. The layer of personality is stripped away, revealing the gears of the conditioning loop. Awareness acts as a light in a dark room. It does not move the furniture, but it shows you exactly where everything is placed. The person is still inside, but the walls of the identity have become transparent. They see the cage they have built for themselves. They notice the subtle ways the brain manipulates their thoughts. Every "I don't feel like it" is revealed as a protective, defensive calculation. The distance is no longer a character trait they are proud of. It is seen as a mechanical function that limits their field of experience. The person stands in the silence of the house. They are no longer a homebody by nature, but a person watching a system operate. The mystery of their own behavior is gone. What remains is the stark, cold reality of a mind that has learned to hide from life. Evening falls, and the room grows dim. The person reaches for the lamp, settling into the familiar hollow of their favorite chair. The mechanism is still running perfectly. The desire to remain distanced is present, humming like a low-frequency radio in the back of the mind. They recognize the loop as it begins. They feel the brain predicting the safety of the night ahead, away from any human eyes. There is no sudden burst of motivation to change. There is only the calm, cold recognition of the system's ongoing, silent operation. The person picks up a book, but their eyes drift back to the front door. They are aware of the distance they have created. The loop continues because it is efficient. It continues because the brain still values the absence of social risk above all other things. Awareness does not stop the habit. It simply removes the blindness that allowed the habit to feel like a natural part of self. The person sits in the silence they have curated. The silence is heavy, filled with the weight of all the things they did not do. The psychological distance remains intact. The world is still out there, and the self is still in here, separated by a learned fear. The mechanism is exposed, yet it remains functional. The person is an observer of their own retreat, watching the clock tick toward midnight. They see the comfort for what it is. It is not a reward, but a ceiling that they have lowered over their own living heads. The brain continues to offer the relief of staying in. The person accepts it, but they no longer believe the lies they tell themselves. They are aware of the trade being made. They trade the possibility of connection for the certainty of a quiet, empty, and safe room. The house remains a bunker. The person remains the soldier. The war against the outside world continues, even if it is only mental. The loop is quiet, persistent, and deep. It is the sound of a life being lived in the small gaps between other people's lives. The person stands in the bathroom, looking at their reflection in the mirror under the hum of a flickering fluorescent light. They see someone who has successfully avoided the world. The face is rested, the eyes are calm, and the skin is untouched. This is the face of someone who has mastered the art of distance. They have avoided every social mistake and every public embarrassment. However, the reflection feels like a stranger. The mirror does not show a person who is living. It shows a person who is waiting. The identity of the homebody is now a physical weight. It is a skin that has grown tight, making any movement feel strained. They realize the home is no longer a sanctuary. It has become a reflection of the internal barriers they have spent years carefully building. The psychological distance is not a shield against the world. It is a mirror that shows the self as a hollow, disconnected observer. Every choice to stay in has been a vote for this specific version of reality. A reality where the self is always safe. There is no instruction on how to break the glass. There is only the realization that the glass is there and very thick. The mechanism has achieved its goal. It has created a person who is perfectly protected from the friction of human existence and connection. The reflection stares back, silent and still. The person realizes they are trapped inside the very comfort they fought so hard to maintain. The silence of the house is no longer peaceful. It is the sound of a system that has finally run out of external inputs. They see the mechanism not as a protector, but as a filter that has removed the color from their own individual history. The mirror shows the truth of the distance. It is not the world that is far away. It is the person who has left. The house is quiet, and the world outside continues to move in its messy, loud, and completely unpredictable way through the night. The mechanism of psychological distancing remains active. It will likely fire again tomorrow morning when the first invitation or obligation eventually arrives. The person knows this now. They see the loop, the payoff, and the identity as a single, functioning system of survival and avoidance. Understanding the mechanism does not automatically stop the mechanism from running its course throughout the person's daily, ordinary, and quiet life. It simply changes the quality of the silence. The distance is no longer a mystery. It is a visible structure of the mind. The door remains locked, and the keys remain on the table. The person is still inside, but the walls feel much more narrow. The system is exposed. Whether the person turns the key or stays on the couch, the mechanism is now part of their awareness. This exposure does not provide a key to the door. It only shows you the hinges and the locks you have spent years oiling. If you are interested in seeing more of the hidden systems that drive human behavior, you may find our other explorations useful. We reveal how the mind builds its own reality. This has been a look at how staying home becomes a form of distance. The loop is open. The observation is complete. We will continue to examine the mechanics of the self in the next video. Watching the mechanism is the only way to see the self behind the walls. We remain here, observing the patterns of the mind. The door is there. The couch is there. The choice is a function of a system that you now finally understand in detail.